Hi, I'm Kirby Allison, and I'm thrilled to be back here in Cuba as we continue to explore the world of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition, a world perhaps exemplified at its magnificent best by this country's incomparable Habanos cigars. Today's journey takes us away from the gently aromatic corridors of Havana with their seemingly ever-present scent of freshly rolled tobacco leaves, all the way 4 hours southeast of the capital to the enchanting coastal city of Trinidad, a UNESCO World Heritage Site situated at the central province of Santo Espiritus. Now regarded as one of the best preserved cities in the whole Caribbean, Trinidad played a historical role of great importance in the 18th and 19th centuries as a thriving center for Cuba's trade in sugar. It is also, of course, the city after which one of Cuba's most acclaimed and fabled cigars is named, and we now embark upon what I know will be a fascinating journey to discover the story behind the incredible brand Trinidad. The Trinidad brand has a remarkable history which truly evokes all the elements of mystery and exclusivity associated with the world-famous cigars which have been produced by the people of this stunning island nation over hundreds of years. Born alongside Cohiba within the hallowed walls of El Laguito, Trinidad was initially produced solely to serve as a diplomatic token, quietly gifted by the Cuban government to foreign dignitaries. So discreetly special was this unique brand to the government that it would be a full 10 years after the global launch of Cohiba in 1982 that the Trinidad name would even become known to anyone outside the small select circle upon whom it had been bestowed. It would still be another 6 years until Trinidad would finally emerge from the shadows with the launch of the Trinidad Fundadores in 1998. Yet somehow, even amid the growing popularity of Trinidad cigars, and especially the coveted Trinidad Fundadores, this brand has managed to maintain a truly enigmatic status as a special jewel in the crown of Cuban heritage, balancing widespread global acclaim with an aura of unmatched mystique. In this, our latest series, we set out to uncover the many legends that surround this elusive brand, and we further examine the distinctive characteristics that have made Trinidad so universally respected and loved amongst collectors and connoisseurs alike, the qualities that set it apart as one of Cuba's most sought-after tobacco treasures. As we peel back the layers of Trinidad's storied past, we uncover a narrative not just of exclusivity, but of a hidden gem within Cuba's illustrious tobacco legacy. A story unfolds of a brand that for years remained shrouded in secrecy, its whispers confined to the corridors of diplomacy. This veil of mystery lingered until a fortuitous encounter in 1992 when Marvin Shanken, on a visit to El Laguito for the inaugural issue of Cigar Afficionado, chanced upon the production of Trinidad cigars. This serendipitous discovery at the heart of Cuba's most prestigious cigar factory marked the beginning of Trinidad's journey from a diplomatic secret to a coveted treasure among cigar aficionados worldwide. I have the privilege of being here in Havana, Cuba with David Savona, executive editor of Cigar Aficionado. Of course, Cigar Aficionado back in 1992 was the publication that discovered Trinidad. It was in their pages that the Trinidad brand of cigars being rolled at El Laguito was first written about for the world. David is here on behalf of Cigar Aficionado to share with us some of these stories behind this truly monumental moment in Cuban cigar history. David, thank you so much. It's really hard to believe that something like Trinidad could have remained a secret for so long, and that it was on a chance encounter with Marvin Shanken that it was debuted to the world.
That's true. Trinidad is one of the most mysterious of cigar brands because of its origins. And back in the 1990s, nobody knew about it. As the story goes, Marvin Shanken, who founded Cigar Aficionado, he traveled to Cuba in 1991, and he was on assignment for one of his other magazines, Wine Spectator. Cigar Aficionado didn't exist at the time. And he was doing a cover story called The Allure of Cuban Cigars. And even though many of the people who worked for Wine Spectator at the time weren't truly into cigars and thought it was maybe not the best of ideas, Marvin said, I love cigars, I'm going to Cuba, this is a cover story, this will be something else. And on that mission of discovery, spending time in Havana and other parts of Cuba, he traveled to cigar factories, he smoked an enormous number of cigars, he met with all kinds of cigar people. And he went to Laguito, the home of, at the time, the birthplace, of course, of Cohiba cigars. And there was a discovery there of a brand that no one had ever heard of called Trinidad. Flash forward to the first issue of Cigar Aficionado, the debut issue in the autumn of 1992. There's a story. The first issue of the magazine has all kinds of cigar stories, including a story on Cohiba, the most famous of Cuban brands. At the end of that story, there's a little sidebar, very small, taking up maybe one page. It says, Cuba's greatest secret, Trinidad. And there it was to let the world know about Trinidad. In that story, it even said that not only was it a secret to cigar lovers around the world, the brand wasn't sold, you couldn't get it in Havana, you couldn't get it elsewhere in the world. The only way to get that brand at the time, that cigar, was as a gift of Fidel Castro. Castro gave gifts of Cohibas, of course, but when Cohiba became commercialized, he wanted something truly special, something unavailable for extra special gifts, and that was the diplomatic Trinidad. And it was revealed in those pages in that first issue. And then in 1992, the cigar world, of course, knew about Trinidad.
What was the reaction? Here are, cigar aficionados and connoisseurs, who really dedicate themselves to scouring the Cuban cigar market to know everything. And they were learning something for the first time, not of a new brand. They learned of something that had been being rolled at that point for 25 plus years.
Well, of course, you always want what you can't get, right? That's a key part of any desirable element of a product, luxury product experience, you name it. The name is the unicorn. Cigars are unicorns that you really can't get. This is the ultimate of unicorns. So, and again, this is a couple of years before I joined Cigar Aficionado, so I knew this as a reader. And of course now, having dealt with Marvin and read the magazine and being at the magazine for 28 years now, knowing from him, but people wanted it. But of course they couldn't get it. And just to go on to talk about how secretive this brand was, flash forward a couple of years to 1994. Again, Marvin Shanken went down to Havana and had a one-on-one interview with Fidel Castro, who at the time, of course, was the leader of Cuba. And they talked about a great many things, the U.S.-Cuba relations, the embargo, the human rights record of Cuba. It's quite the interview. Marvin asked him about Trinidad during that interview and said, we hear there's a cigar that's only available as a gift from you called Trinidad. And Castro said, I don't know anything about it. So the cigar was so secret that Fidel even denied it in the press. But of course it was real. The cigar became commercialized a couple of years later and became the cigar people wanted to have.
Beyond the rich aromas and meticulous craftsmanship of its cigars, the essence of Trinidad is intrinsically tied to Cuba's profound history and vibrant culture. As we venture further into this narrative of this remarkable brand, we turn our gaze to the city of Trinidad itself, a jewel of cultural heritage and historical significance. This city, with its cobblestone streets and colonial architecture, is where the island's natives, Spanish, and tobacco converged to give birth to modern Cuban culture as we know it today. Through the expert insights of the Trinidad City historian, we explore the city's significance to Cuba and why it was chosen as the namesake for the cigars that would embody the essence of Cuban history, culture, and pride to the world. Barbara, thank you so much. Gracias por todo. Having me here in Trinidad. I mean, what a beautiful day and what a magnificent city.
Para mí es un placer que estés aquí en Trinidad y te doy la bienvenida a esta ciudad.
I mean, of course, for those that enjoy Cuban cigars, I mean, Trinidad is the name given to one of the most important of all the Habanos brands. I was hoping you could, maybe help explain to us a little bit about why Cuba chose Trinidad, this city, to be the name that would represent this country around the world.
Trinidad representa en muchos aspectos, en el aspecto sobre todo cultural, la ciudad importante de Cuba, la ciudad que reúne el legado hispánico, el legado africano y el legado aborigen. Trinidad es la ciudad colonial por excelencia, la ciudad que reúne la tradición europea, que trajeron muchos inmigrantes y traen todo el tiempo a esta ciudad. Trinidad es un lugar de encuentro de culturas. La cultura aborigen y la cultura hispana se encontraron aquí y empezaron un nuevo proceso cultural, un nuevo proceso que incluye todo tipo de manifestaciones de la vida, ¿no? La religión, la música, la economía, la propia formación social de esta nueva sociedad. Y dentro de eso, unos y otros se aportan elementos. Uno de estos elementos es el tabaco, que le sirve de integración social, de integración cultural, de integración de actividades, ¿ves? Un elemento de socialización.
Yeah. What year was Trinidad founded? I mean, just how old is this city?
Trinidad se fundó a principios de 1514. Ahora, el próximo año, va a cumplir 510 años de existencia.
Wow. I feel that when people think of Trinidad, they think of the sugar trade. I mean, how important was sugar to Trinidad? And, tobacco, of course, was also a product. Was tobacco here before that? And how did those kind of work together?
El tabaco es el primero. El tabaco comienza, pudiéramos decir, la historia de Trinidad.
Okay.
Hace siglos ya. Después es que viene la caña de azúcar. Y el tabaco y la caña de azúcar coexisten en una misma historia. Durante mucho tiempo hubo producción de tabaco y hubo producción de caña de azúcar, uno al lado del otro.
And of course, I mean, tobacco was one of the first things that the Spanish took back with them to the New World. Am I right?
El tabaco en el Nuevo Mundo fue el gran hallazgo para los europeos. Los europeos llegan y encuentran unas culturas diferentes a las que ellos conocían, productos diferentes, plantas, animales, personas completamente diferentes. Y una de las cosas que más les impacta, que más les interesa, es el tabaco. ¿Por qué? Porque es en gran medida el centro de una cultura aborigen que usaban el tabaco como un producto para rituales religiosos, rituales de curación de las personas enfermas, como algo común, inclusive con el uso que le damos hoy también, de distraerse fumando. ¿No? La persona fuma y se distrae. Bueno, ellos también. Y el europeo también empieza a disfrutar de esa cultura del tabaco. Y se dan cuenta que pueden comercializar el tabaco, que en Europa gusta y que lo pueden vender y puede la gente disfrutarlo también. Y comienza el gran comercio entre América y Europa.
I mean, that's fascinating how, Trinidad has this incredible rich history of influence, not just on the world through its export of tobacco and of sugar, but also in Cuban culture, bringing these elements together and integrating them. The early days at El Laguito were highly charged with a great excitement. The new leader of Cuba, President Fidel Castro, had established the factory in secret to produce the beloved Cohiba cigars that he cherished and would often present as diplomatic gifts. Trinidad was conceived here alongside Cohiba and destined to provide an opportunity for the country's diplomatic corps to showcase Cuba's cultural wealth to the world. Time has certainly moved on since those beginning days of inspiration and innovation, but today we are deeply honored to be able to spend time with Juana Ramos Guerra, one of the original torcedores of El Laguito. Juana, gracias por todo. Estamos aquí en Havana, en la casa, enfrente de la casa de El Laguito. And thank you so much. Gracias por su tiempo y para todas sus historias that we'll be able to hear today. Back whenever El Laguito was founded, it was this incredibly special, secret casa dedicated to producing the most important cigars in all of Cuba. How was it that you first came to El Laguito, and how did that story begin for you?
Era un secreto la fábrica esta. Yo llegué aquí gracias a mi papá, que era amigo de Celia Sánchez, y ella le dijo que estaba buscando jóvenes para que hicieran el tabaco que se elaboraba aquí, que era el tabaco que se le hacía a Fidel. Y mi papá dijo, vas a hacer el tabaco a esa fábrica, y me trajo. Y aquí me quedé. Entré en el curso que lo hacían aquellas compañeras antiguas, primeras que hicieron el tabaco para Fidel. Y fue muy bonito, me gustó, fue impresionante, me enamoré del tabaco.
So what year was it that you began here at El Laguito?
Comencé a trabajar en el Laguito en el año 72, evaluándome en el año 73, porque no tenía todavía los 17 años. Y entonces ahí comencé ya como operaria en el año 73. Empezamos a hacer panetela, ahí comencé. Prácticamente estaba empezando, era muy joven.
What was the atmosphere? Here you are at El Laguito, rolling some of the most important cigars for the entire country.
Bueno, aquello era una cosa muy familiar. Todos éramos como una familia, pensaban lo mismo. Queríamos todos hacer el tabaco de Fidel. Era muy emocionante porque todos tenían deseos de trabajar. Trabajábamos mucho y lo hacíamos con mucha pasión. Así era.
Yeah.
Era una gran familia esta casa. Comencé a hacer panetelas, luego Laguito número 2 y Laguito número 1, que eran las 3 vitolas que se hacían en esta fábrica.
Yeah.
Aquí me enamoré del tabaco. Fui una alumna aventajada porque el curso duraba de 6 a 9 meses y en 4 meses a mí me evaluaron. Rápidamente comencé a hacer las vitolas superiores. Para mí, uno de los momentos más especiales fue cuando Emilia Tamayo, la directora, me llamó y me dijo que ella quería que yo formara parte del grupo de mujeres que íbamos a hacer un tabaco nuevo. Éramos 3 o 4 compañeras y que me habían seleccionado por la calidad, por el esfuerzo, por mi buen trabajo, me habían seleccionado. Yo me puse feliz y era el Trinidad Fundadores que se lanzó en el año 98. Pensábamos que otro lancero, que no era así, porque nos dimos cuenta de que el lancero era, sabía diferente. El lancero es un tabaco fuerte y estábamos haciendo un tabaco que era un poco más delicado, un poco más aromático, y ese era el Trinidad.
Ah.
Era el Trinidad, porque no sabían igual.
And what's interesting about these cigars, I mean, the Cohibas were for Fidel, but the Trinidads were given as a gift diplomatically. And, you know, they were representing Cuba to the entire world.
Sí, era lo más importante. No eran comercializables, eran los tabacos que Fidel le hacía regalos a presidentes, a personas importantes que venían a Cuba. No tenía marca, eran sin anillas, eran muy sencillos, pero eran muy sabrosos y por eso todo el mundo quería que Fidel les regalara un tabaco. No tenían nombres todavía. Si era el regalo que Fidel hacía a los presidentes, a las personas importantes del mundo, era una emoción indescriptible porque nos sentíamos muy importantes. Estábamos haciendo algo grande para Cuba.
Yeah. And the Trinidad, I mean, it's different than the Laguito #1. It enjoys a special, you know, status amongst connoisseurs. What was it about the blend of that cigar that you think has made it stand out over all these years?
El Trinidad lleva una media banda más de seco. El seco es la hoja más aromática que tiene el tabaco. Y los 2 milímetros que toma extras son los de la media banda de seco.
Yeah.
Sabe diferente porque el Trinidad no está fermentado 3 veces. El Laguito #1 sufre la tercera fermentación aquí, pero el Trinidad no tiene la tercera fermentación. Por eso sabe diferente, además es más aromático por la media banda de seco.
Cuba is a small country, but its impact around the world is massive because of these cigars. You know, what is it that you think is special about these cigars that has had them enjoy such wide popularity?
Bueno, nuestro país es muy pequeño, pero tiene la parte más occidental, una tierra especial, la mejor tierra para el tabaco. Por eso allí se dan, es una tierra que no es como esta, por ejemplo, es una tierra que es movida, suave, los minerales que tiene la tierra.
Yeah.
Por eso da el tabaco tan especial, no hay otra en el mundo como esta. Han tratado de lograrlo en muchas partes del mundo, pero no hay una que dé el tabaco que da esta tierra. Por eso es tan especial. El único en el mundo es el cubano.
Yeah. One of the other things I'm struck, though, is the ability of these cigars to capture the heart, the passion of the Cuban people. And somehow, whenever you are enjoying a Habanos cigar, you're able to experience the people of Cuba and everything that they put into these cigars.
Porque sabemos que es el embajador del mundo. Porque sabemos, tenemos que hacerlo con pasión y amor, porque es el que nos identifica en el mundo entero, en cualquier rincón. El tabaco es el que nos identifica. Y los cubanos sabemos que es bueno, y por eso lo amamos, y por eso lo hacemos con pasión, y por eso lo trabajamos con lo más grande que tenemos, y sentimos mucho orgullo. Tenemos que sentir orgullo de lo mejor que tenemos, lo único que hay en el mundo.
Yeah.
Nuestro mejor embajador.
After Trinidad's elusive and mysterious name first appeared in that 1992 issue of Cigar Afficionado, demand for the Trinidad began to build amongst collectors of Cuban cigars. In 1994, the palates of these collectors was wet during Cigar Aficionado's Dinner of the Century held in Paris. It was during an auction at this dinner that 2 of the first cabinets of 50 Trinidad cigars were first offered to the public. They were described in that night's auction program as Cuba Tobacco's most exclusive cigar, with all production reserved for diplomatic corps.
That is an important part of the Trinidad history. The Cigar Aficionado's Dinner of the Century, 1994, in Paris. It was the first time that people were able to see and hear about and experience this diplomatic Trinidad. It was a dinner unlike any other. Amazing wines, world-class chefs, a remarkable cuisine, a guest list of who's from all around the world. Pierre Salinger was there telling stories about JFK in Cuba and the Cuban embargo. Rush Limbaugh was there. They sat at the same table even though they were politically opposed. They were brought together by the love of cigars. All manner of stars. Francis Ford Coppola was there. And of course, this is Marvin Shanken bringing this wonderful world of cigar smokers together. The wines were remarkable. 1963, Quinta Noval Nacional Port closed the evening. And they smoked these amazing cigars, among them Trinidads, the diplomatic Trinidads, and they presented these things up for auction, which went for amazing prices. Boxes were signed by Castro. It was just a ridiculous amount of entirely amazing cigars among them, and probably first and foremost among them, the Trinidad diplomatic cigar.
And the other cigars at the dinner, what were the other cigars?
Oh, there was an A-sized Cohiba, which has never been sold commercially, a 9.25 inch long, 47 ring gauge or 49 ring gauge. I'm getting my dimensions wrong. Cohiba, amazing smoke.
Are these, the connoisseurs of connoisseurs. Literally a room full of the legends and most important collectors of Cuban tobacco. Cohiba, of course, at that time had existed for 12 years. Having been launched in 1982. It too, sharing a very exciting kind of mystique in its creation, and something that was always certainly a cigar for collectors. But then with Trinidad sitting next to Cohiba, how did those in attendance think of the Trinidad?
Again, I wasn't there for this, so it's hard for me to say firsthand. Yeah. But from what I hear, amazing reception. And of course, looking back upon it, it would be legendary to smoke an A-sized Cohiba made just for the dinner. But even looking at that cigar as unobtainable, completely unobtainable cigar, I would put the diplomatic Trinidad above that in terms of rarity and importance. I can think of I don't know if I can think of another cigar that has the legend, the mystery, and the collectability of a diplomatic Trinidad. Nothing even comes close. A 1492, maybe, but not as good as a diplomatic Trinidad. That's the rarest of the rare. We write about cigar auctions. There used to be a far greater number of them in the 1990s. Christie's used to do a very famous cigar auction. And I remember I forget the exact year. It was sometime in the 1990s when a box of Trinidad set the record, an auction price record. It was $450 per cigar, which was an enormously large number at the time. Of course, now it's almost laughable because there are new production cigars that are sniffing that number or going for even more. But at the time, the world went nuts for Trinidad. Collectors went crazy for diplomatic Trinidads. It was unparalleled in its demand by collectors and cigar connoisseurs.
As you said about the dinner of the century, which was based in Paris, this was the dinner of the century, the first time ever Cuba had done a dinner outside of Havana in Paris, where a lot of journalists, cigar lovers, retailers were invited. It's really exclusive because it's only a small restaurant. But what they wanted to do as well is they wanted to raise money for, I think it was either the Cuban Health or Charity for the Children in Cuba. They sent over 10 cabinets of the Cohiba Pyramid, 10 cabinets of the Cohiba A, of 50s of each, but only 7 of the Trinidad Diplomat cabinet of 50. So this is one of the 7 that was at the auction. They didn't just auction these off at the time, But it was the first time whoever was there at the dinner got to smoke this cigar.
Wow.
Because all the guests got offered a cigar on the night, this cigar. And if some of the guests never smoked that cigar at the time, can you imagine if some of these guys still had that cigar? As long as they kept it in a good condition.
Paid for the dinner.
Exactly. In today's date, yes, definitely. But because of this cabinet, the Trinidad was born. But let me just show you
please.
This cabinet. So as you see on top, you got Fidel Castro's signature on top, October something 1994. This is when the dinner of the century was. And then inside, just to make it official, they had a certificate in there.
Wow.
So this is number 3 of 7.
So this size, the size of the Trinidad cigar is known as Lancero. Their blending and limited production are amongst the best kept secrets in the world of cigars. The holder of this box will enjoy the pleasure of smoking these cigars, not really, and it'll be a rare privilege worthy of the most demanding cigar lover. Wow.
Now, the length is still the same as the Fundadores, but the ring gauge is different. This is why it's known as a Trinidad Diplomat. This is a 38 ring gauge, and the Fundadores is a 40 ring gauge.
But the Fundadores had not been launched at this point. This was
correct.
Literally the first time.
The first time that the world had got to see the Trinidad cigar.
And again, we have these gold Trinidad brands.
Yeah, the actual bands, if you notice, the actual gold is gold. And in the days where they used to use proper gold, with the humidity, it tarnishes or reacts, so it becomes slightly greeny. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so in the world of cigars, in the world of rare cigars, this is probably super rare.
Yeah. I mean, it's a holy grail cabinet.
One of the holy grails.
And what I think is particularly profound about this is how important, pivotal of a role these 7 cabinets in that dinner, Trinidad's inclusion, played in Trinidad ultimately in 1998 being offered as a boutique brand, as an official Habanos brand, of course launching with the Fundadores. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit more about, again, the significance of this box, because it was the first time that they'd been smoked. What was the reception?
I mean, the reception of this cigar after the dinner is, we want this. How comes we've never seen this? As a lot of retailers that were there, they started saying to their distributors, how comes this is not made? You know, how can we get Habanos to stop producing them? Mm-hmm. So the myth has become reality. So we know it exists, but how can we get this into the world? And it was just like, if I say to you, Kirby, I'm sorry, but you can't have that, you want it.
Yeah.
You want it more. Mm-hmm. Yeah? And so the wait was getting longer and longer and longer since 94 to 98.
The journey of Trinidad cigars from diplomatic exclusivity to global acclaim reaches a crescendo with the commercial release of the Trinidad Fundadores in 1998. Following the buzz of the 1994 Dinner of the Century, the demand amongst tobacco connoisseurs for access to this elusive brand became undeniable. Habanos, recognizing the growing demand, made a decision that would forever change the landscape of Cuban cigars. Next, we sit down with master blender Raul Valladares, who was tasked with creating the blend of the new Trinidad brand, and Ana Lopez, the director of marketing at Habanos, who witnessed firsthand the unveiling of Trinidad to the world. Señor Valladares, gracias a todo. Thank you for coming. And we're here today to talk about one of the most important moments in the last several decades in Habanos, and that was the launch of the Trinidad Fundadores. And as Habanos was approaching this moment to take what was then called just the Trinidads and officially launch it to the world as this beautiful cigar, the Fundadores. As the master blender, where was the challenge?
Bueno, cuando eso yo era jefe de la actividad de las fábricas, las ligadas de las fábricas, de todo lo que era el proceso de la producción del tabaco torcido a nivel nacional e internacional. Cuando Panchito, que era el director de Habanos, en aquel entonces nos convocó para desarrollar una marca, análisis de desarrollo de la marca Trinidad, entre los que estaba yo para analizar la ligada. Entonces yo me presenté y oí lo que nos plantearon. Cuando eso, yo lo primero que hice fue decirle a Panchito que si era una marca, era una cosa diferente a una vitola. Cuando tú vas a hacer una ligada para una vitola, es una ligada sola. Ahora, cuando tú quieres hacer una ligada para una marca, tienes que tener un rango más amplio, porque en esa fábrica, en esa fabricación, una marca, pues puede ser una fábrica, puede ser dos fábricas, puede ser tres fábricas, puede el mundo entero. ¿Me comprende? Uh-huh. ¿Y qué se pensaba? Perseguidaba el presidente de Habanos. Buscar la manera de que hubieran más ampliación de gusto a la gente y que por lo tanto quería que fuera una marca que tuviera como roce fundamental ser una marca cuando se utiliza la clase seco es aromática. Uh-huh. No es fortaleza, sino entonces es una ligada que tenía como esencia el seco como base de la ligada.
The Fundadores has been a legendary cigar, and whenever you look back on your career as having created something that now has been enjoyed by so many people, how does that make you feel as you look back on your career as having been the one responsible for honoring Cuba, with this cigar?
En aquel momento, yo no aquilataba que eso pudiera llegar a donde llegó. Hoy lo podemos ver y nos sirve de satisfacción y de alegría, porque cooperamos en un momento determinado con ese trabajo hecho, que lo hicimos con todo el amor del mundo y lo logramos.
Here with Ana Lopez, the marketing director of Habanos between 1994 and 2003, overseeing the most pivotal years of the development of the Trinidad brand and its debut to the entire world. And she's here today to share a few of these stories with us.
It's a real pleasure to be with you today, Kirby, and I hope that being here in Trinidad will bring us back to the time that the brand came to the market. I hope so.
So you have some beautiful boxes of Fundadores here, and I have to confess, I don't think I've actually ever seen one of the originals, which you've been so generous to bring today.
Well, you are very lucky, Kirby, because thanks Hunter and Franco House Reserve, we have kept some of those cigars from the first batch of Fundadores. Not exactly from the 1998, but yes, from the first time that Fundadores was made, before the new release in 2003. And you will have the pleasure of reveal those Fundadores today and smoke and to share this cigar. So
What an honor.
you are very, very lucky.
Thank you. And so what was the original presentation of the Fundadores?
Well, the original Fundadores that were the diplomáticos as they were known in the market before the commercial release, those Fundadores were produced in the factories in plain boxes. Mostly of those plain boxes were 100 cigars. And afterward, they were placed in humidors. When the brand was launched into the market in 1998, the presentation was in boxes of 24, in boxes of 50, and in individual pack of 5.
Wow. And this, of course, has the iconic gold band.
This one is the original band. We introduced a logo for the brand and to dress the boxes and everything, but we maintain this band, like a link between those cigars produced by the first time in 1969 and those that we introduced into the market in 1998.
Well, shall we do the honors?
Of course.
May I cut and light this one for you?
Oh, that would be a real pleasure. Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Straight cut.
Please. This is a cigar that will last for about 1 hour. So it's a cigar that will give you all the time to reflect and think and to enjoy.
I mean, with the rich history of Trinidad, hopefully an hour is enough time, to fully cover all that there is to learn from you about this period. Because again, between 1994 was a pivotal moment. We have 98, the release of these. But you were also marketing director of Habanos up until the point in 2003, which was an incredibly important moment in the development of the brand beyond, again, this iconic classic.
Yes, you are right. I have that privilege of being part of the birth of this brand because I would say the birth into the market because, of course, the origin of the brand is back to 1969. And the name of the brand, that is the Trinidad, in honor to the Trinidad city.
Here.
Thank you.
Look at that beauty.
Thank you very much.
And of course, here was this incredible diplomatic icon, this emblem of Cuban culture, heritage, and history that was reserved as an incredibly and exceptionally special gift given, really on behalf of the entire Cuban government and the Cuban people. But then in 1998, here comes this incredible Fundadores, and it's released to a wider audience. So what was it, that ultimately catalyzed that event?
Well, there's a combination of different factors, Kirby. I would say that first, in 1994, it was the first time that Trinidad came on the scene when Marvin Shanken request from Habanos to have some Trinidad for the dinner of the century. And that came after Marvin being in Cuba in the beginning of the 1991, 1992, and he produced a very small piece about Trinidad, and the secret was revealed. At the time, for some people that work in Cuba Tobacco and Habanos, including myself, we were not aware of Trinidad to be...
Really?
Yes, because Trinidad was a big, big secret. And in general, the Laguito factory was like a mystery, very protected. Not everybody can go into the Laguito factory and discover the secret there. After that, Marvin was very excited about Trinidad, and he participated in 1993 in London in a dinner where the new lineage of Cohiba, 1492, was presented. And at that dinner, there was an auction that was promoted by Mr. Nicholas Freeman. At that auction, first time, there was a box signed by Fidel Castro. The auction was in favor of the Cuban health. And from that, Marvin was the auctioneer, by the way. And he realized that was something very special about the boxes signed by Fidel Castro and this sort of thing. And when he was organizing the dinner of the century for 1994, he came with the request of having Trinidad, that special cigar that he almost discovered in at the Laguito factory, but he wanted those boxes signed by Fidel. So there was a big deal on that occasion. We prepared, because until that time, Trinidad was presented just in plain boxes. Mm-hmm. In plain boxes because it was for the purpose of being presented as a gift. And usually they were afterward transferred to humidors. So first time we have to decide to make a proper logo for the brand, to present the brand and so on. Those boxes that were given to Marvin Shanken had the first time the first design of Trinidad. Mm-hmm. And there were cigars with the ring gauge 38 and 192 millimeters, the same that the Laguito. I mean, they were the Diplomat as we known today because they were the same size of the Cohiba Lanceros. Those cigars released in 1994 were exactly the same size that Cohiba Lanceros. The difference, yes, the difference between those cigars were just the blend, but they were the same size. So, for that point started the pressure from the collectors about what is this brand? What is Trinidad? We want that Trinidad. I think that afterwards, also in 1997, there was another auction in Geneva. And well, that was one part of the pressure. Mm-hmm. The another pressure was about Habanos have the mandate of releasing new brands. We needed new brands in order to balance the situation that we have from the legal point of view. Mm-hmm. In 1996, for example, we introduced into the market Cuba and Vegueros. In 1997 was the Vegas Robina. So we had to have, in 1998, Trinidad was waiting. It was
the moment.
It was the moment. We say, well, it's the time for Trinidad. But we said, let's do Trinidad something special. Yeah. Mr. Francisco Linares, that was the president of Habanos S.A. at the time, he was, before being president of Habanos, he worked close to Fidel. He knew about Trinidad. And he wanted to make a proper tribute to Trinidad. So he insisted we wanted something special. Well, we decided, well, let's keep it in this small secret that is Trinidad. Let's try to put in this brand all that passion that is in Cuban cigar, but also that romanticism of the name of the brand, which is so related to the city of Trinidad. So we said, let's try to keep just one size, which is, we will call the Fundadores, because it's the foundation. And that is the foundation of the brand. But let's try to do something different. So we maintain the cigar band, as I said, that was the same band that was used previously, but we changed the two things, very important things. We changed first the ring gauge, just giving a slightly more trendy ring gauge. At that time, 40 was a trendy ring gauge, was bigger than 38, was something different. Today we will be probably different the situation. But at the time was something new, the 40 ring gauge. We changed the blend. We requested from a very special master blender, Maestro Raul Valladares. We asked him together with the master blender of the Laguito factory to do something different. Something aromatic, something that will give own personality to the brand. Mm-hmm. And we made the first time the presentation of the boxes in 24. It was the first time that we had the Trinidad in 24 and presented in a different way. Because when we went to the industry and said, let's do it the 24, They said, no, it's better to look maybe in a different way. So we decided to put the cigars horizontally instead of vertically, and in different layers of 6 cigars. So that was something introduced just for Trinidad. It's the only brand that within the Habanos portfolio have this presentation.
And so were the Trinidad Fundadores, whenever they were, being produced at El Laguito exclusively as a diplomatic gift, were they referred to as the Fundadores, or at that time were they just the Trinidads?
The Trinidad. The Trinidad diplomat is what they are known in the market today, but they were referred in Cuba like the Trinidad. And in the factory mainly, they knew about those cigars, especially produced for the Council of State. In Habanos and in Cuba Tobacco, we didn't know too much. I mean, probably the legal department knew about that and everything, but not everybody knew about that brand that was just there in very small quantity. I mean, in that article that Marvin Shanken produced in the autumn of 1992, Mr. Abelino Lara, at the time director of the Laguito factory, he said that average production was about 20 boxes of 100 cigars per month. So can you imagine? He said that only 3 or 4 cigar rollers were just allocated to produce that brand. So it was from the beginning, Trinidad was something very special, very small brand, and very interesting.
What's interesting about this story is how, ultimately, and today, you see how the Trinidad Fundadores really has, in some ways, kind of a cult following. I mean, in some ways, it's like a unicorn cigar that, collectors, really seek out. Incredibly highly sought after, universally loved. What was it like in 1998 when these were released, and what was the reception amongst those collectors?
Well, in 1998, the trend was mostly about slender cigar. At the time, it was Cohiba. The Cohiba was in the market just from 1982. So the Lanceros and Coronas Especiales were very fashionable cigars still in the 90s. Also, we had in Monte Cristo, we have very slender cigars in most of the brands, which is not the case today. And that was very well welcomed by the connoisseurs. And the thing that was just one size in the brand that really made the connoisseur think about, this is really special. This is not just a brand that comes to the market in 4 or 5 different sizes. It's just one size. If you want to taste and try this brand, this blend, you have to go for this size. And that was really interesting, the reaction from the connoisseur. Most of them, I would say, appreciated that particular decision of Habanos at the time of just going with the brand with just one side. The secret of the brand is the blend. I think all of that flavor and aroma that you can feel even after 20 years, the secret is in the blend. And we have to thank Maestro Valladares that at the time made that blend for Trinidad, because have given to the brand a personality that is totally different to other brands. When you have a Trinidad, you know that you are enjoying something different. We have very good brands. We have exceptional brands like Cohiba, like Romeo and Julieta, Monte Cristo. All of them are different. All of them have their own personality. And Trinidad is something special. And in some way, Trinidad was born as a little sister of Cohiba. They both were created in the 60s. Cohiba, 1966, Trinidad, 1969. Behind of this brand, there is a lot of work, from the farmers to the factories, the cigar rollers, and everybody that have to make an effort in order to produce these wonderful cigars is the reason that's why for the connoisseurs and everybody want to have any of these cigars in their humidor.
As we draw the final notes of this episode to a close, let us linger on the significance of the name Trinidad for the cigars that would serve as ambassadors of Cuban culture and excellence to the world. From the onset, Trinidad was envisioned as more than a simple diplomatic gift or hallmark of exceptional craftsmanship. It was destined to be an emissary of Cuba itself, representing the tradition of Cuban culture and the pinnacle of excellence to every corner of the globe. Chosen for its deep resonance with the history and spirit of one of Cuba's most culturally significant cities, the Trinidad name is a homage to the island's heritage, a symbol that binds the legacy of its people with the fruits of their land. Through the artistry of the country's tobacco legacy, Cuba's story and the spirit of the Cuban people are rolled into every Trinidad cigar, extending an invitation to the world to partake in the island's heritage and experience the passion of its people. Today, just as it was at its creation alongside Cohiba, every Trinidad cigar remains a carefully crafted gift from the Cuban people to the world. It's a promise, a celebration of culture, wrapped in the smoke of camaraderie and shared experience. As the Trinidad Fundadores began their global journey in 1998, they carried with them not just the taste of Cuban excellence, but the narrative of a people in their enduring spirit. In the next episode of this series, we turn the page to 2003, when Trinidad would further its global reach, broadening the canvas upon which this illustrious ambassador of Cuban culture paints its story. For in the whispers of aficionados and the quiet reverence of collectors lies the continuing saga of Trinidad, a name that not only captures the essence of Cuban excellence, but is itself a testament to the timeless allure of this beautiful island.